Hey everybody, it's Anna and welcome back to my booktube channel. Today I am going to be doing the Bookish Elements tag, which was created by Sarah Collier, and the video that I first watched that I'm counting as my tag is thanks to Allie from A Genteel Black Hole. So I will link their channel down below so that you can go follow them if you like just like dry wit, poetry, and eclectic reading tastes. That's Allie's channel in a footnote. So, or in a footnote, in a nutshell is what I was trying to say. Anyway, so let's move on with our prompts. The first prompt is, how do you feel about foreshadowing or dropped hints? Generally speaking, I feel positively about these if they're done skillfully, but there's nothing more annoying than when a book keeps like beating you over the head with a bunch of foreshadowing or dropped hints that are too obvious, especially if it's going to be something like a mystery or like some type of genre writing. I really think that like being too heavy-handed with foreshadowing is horrible if you are writing a genre story. Question 2 is bookmarks. What do you use? How do you feel about bending the corner down? I use bookmarks. This is one of I have 2 plastic cups that have bookmarks in them. I have been saving and collecting them for years since I was a kid. Most of them are just like free ones that came either from bookstores or the library or like book depository, RIP. I still miss them. But then I have like some occasionally more nice ones, like this Alice in Wonderland gift I think I got as a high school graduation gift from my aunt. And it's just really nice. It's quite pretty. Some of these, oh yeah, I have a lot of these that were like free from artist tables at like Comic-Cons and other conventions. But I'll pretty much use anything that I have at hand. I feel okay about bending the corners down in books, but I will only really do that in books that I own. I don't do that in library books, and I don't do that in books that I borrow from other people. And generally speaking, I only really do that if I want to like make a note of a quotation or something like that and go back and see it later, or I'm like bookmarking a specific poem for later. I don't usually do that just to save my place. Number 3 is forgotten bookmarks. Have you ever found something strange in a book? Yes. Most recently, this happened to me in one of my series of unfortunate events books. I reread the whole series, was it earlier this year or late last year? I can't remember now. Relatively recently, within the last 12 months for sure. And most of my copies of the books were actually used books that my husband had bought for me because he knows that's my favorite series from when I was a kid. And I found some random kid that I guess the book belonged to, little like 3rd grade school picture wallet sized thing inside of the book, and it just had like his name on it, and he was just making kind of a goofy face for the camera, and I was like, well, wonder where that kid is now. Inscriptions and annotations. How do you feel about writing in a book, and how do you annotate if you do? I feel similarly to dog earing. I write in books that are mine. I don't write in books that I'm borrowing from somebody else. And I would say I don't actually write in most of my books. I did this a lot more so when I was in college because I studied English and classics, so I annotated my own like study copies of books. And usually when I did that, I would do it with like a ballpoint pen, just because it lasts a lot longer, but there are definitely some pencil annotated books that I have there. Now I mostly will do things like little sticky tabs if I need to mark something, but I will occasionally like write in the margins. One book, because the author enjoined us to do it, I actually put little like cute stickers and stuff at different intervals. Introductions and footnotes. Do you read them or avoid? What makes a good introduction? I do read them. In most cases, I read the introduction after the book because sometimes the introduction will spoil the book, particularly if it's a classic. And I know that was exactly the same thing that Allie said, but we have a lot in common in our like reading tastes. And if I'm reading a classic that I've never read before, I generally like to go into it not knowing that much about the plot if I don't already know like how it ends or whatever. But footnotes are really important to read. That's just what I learned from my degree and then from my graduate work, is a lot of times they will explain or provide like useful context that might be lost to the modern reader, and generally also can like reference you to more helpful texts or get you to check out like a translation by comparison in the case of like the Latin literature that I read for school. What makes a good introduction? I think something that doesn't like rehash the plot of the book, but rather like situates the book within its context of the time, and then also like draws attention to stuff like its legacy, how it came to be, how the book is like received and handled now. I'm thinking in particular, the last like great introduction that I read was for Something Wicked This Way Comes, which is written by Ray Bradbury. I don't remember who did the introduction, unfortunately, but like the most recent paperback edition of the book had a really good introduction that had all of those things, and if I remember correctly, really didn't give away too much of the plot. There was a little bit, but not much at all. Accessories. Do you use bookish accessories like a clip-on reading light, book sleeve, annotation materials, book stand, etc.? Yes, and I will show you in just a moment. So the answer to this question is gonna come in multiple parts because I'll answer like all of these. The clip-on reading light I used a lot more when I was a kid because I would be like sneakily trying to hide how much I was reading past my bedtime, but now I'm an adult and my bedtime is whenever I say it is, and usually it's like one more chapter later than I originally intended, so I just use my normal lamp. But I did have a really awesome book light that saw a lot of use in my childhood bedroom. What were the other ones? Annotation materials, kind of already talked about that. I've never used a book stand. I've never really seen the need for it for me personally, but that's also because I don't like sit normally in chairs when I read, or I'm reading like laying down, and a book stand would be of somewhat limited use to me in that sense. I think that for like really huge books, like this amazing Charlie Chaplin archives book my husband has, it would be beneficial to have like a lectern type thing to hold the book up. But for me, it's just not really essential, and it would kind of get in the way of the way I do reading. Although depending on the book or accessibility needs, I could see the purpose for both of those. Actually, I would use a book stand for cookbooks because I like being able to like have the book open while I'm reading the recipe. As for book sleeves, I actually crocheted this one myself out of just random yarn and like a button I had because I was tired of my books in my backpack getting all like dinged up when I would take them to and from work, because I would always like read on my lunch break. It's not a long lunch break, but people are always like, how do you read so much? And I'm like, number one, it's the hobby that takes precedence over all of my other hobbies. And number two, there's actually a lot more like reading time built into your day if you just fill all your downtime with books. But yeah, it's got this cute little like handmade with love button that I put on all my handmade stuff. It's got Alexei Navalny in it right now. And then you can't see it because the book's too big, but I also crocheted this little loop that you can then use to loop over here. So if the book is smaller than the sleeve, it won't fall out. But Navalny is having no trouble staying in the book sleeve. And yeah, this wasn't from a pattern or anything. I just kind of built the base using single crochet, like a chain for foundation, and then single crocheted around, increasing until I got to the width I wanted. And then I just half double crocheted up, and then I made the loop out of chain stitches. So in case you're wondering, how did I make this? It was literally just out of random scrap yarn, and that is how. I just made it until it was the size of a big hardcover. Yeah, art and illustrations. How do cover art and illustrations affect your reading experience? Generally speaking, I would say positively. I don't know, like this is such a subjective question as well, because I know that different people will have like differing opinions about cover art for books. Like I remember when I first started getting into reading classics, I was in like middle school, and that was around like the peak of Twilight popularity, and there was this spate of time there where different like publishers were republishing classic texts but with covers that looked more like the Twilight book covers, I guess to try and get kids to read them, and I absolutely hated that. I hated the way that it looked. But then I also really love a lot of the like pulpy 1950s through 70s sci-fi book covers that I know a lot of people don't really care for. So it is super subjective. I think the right cover art really like makes a difference in terms of selling the book or creating the book as an object of art. And I would say the same thing for illustrations. And mainly I'm talking about something that's like illustrating a prose book, not like a comic, a graphic novel, a picture book, where like a lot of that storytelling is visual through the artwork. I think like if it's just illustrations for a prose book, that can like really enhance the reading experience. But I wouldn't say that bad art in a book necessarily ruins my enjoyment. Format. What format of book do you prefer? Hardback, paperback, audio, digital? Do you do different things for different situations? Let's see. I think that the ones that I use the most frequently are physical copies, whether they're hardback or paperback. And then it just kind of depends on the book. Like if it's a library book, I just read whatever format it comes in. Sometimes I'll elect to buy a paperback of a book if I know the hardcover is really huge and heavy. It also takes up less space on the shelf, and I have a lot of books, so practically speaking, sometimes I don't want them to take up the biggest footprint. I use audio primarily when I am driving, like if I go on a road trip or like when we moved across the country. I don't tend to listen to audio that much in my day-to-day life, although that hasn't always been the case. Definitely like during the pandemic, early years, like 2020 through early 2022, I listened to a lot more audiobooks. Not entirely, oh no, I am sure why. I was like, not entirely sure why. It's because the libraries were closed. So like that was how I was getting most of my library books. I was reading the physical books I already had, but I was only able to get library books digitally until they figured out how to do their like low to no contact book checkout program. So that was why it was so much audio. And then digital, I have a Kindle Oasis. Sadly, they don't make them anymore, which is a shame. And even if they did, I think after this one eventually does die, I'm not going to be going back to Amazon for e-reading. There's been a whole thing about how Amazon has changed their policies such that when you buy digital books from their storefront, you don't actually own the book, you just own a license to the book that they can revoke at any time. And I am not about how bad that is for artists, bad for the consumer, bad for, we know Amazon's not great for indie bookstores as well, but like just bad for the overall bookish ecosystem. So I don't really feel like giving them any more of my money if I do replace my e-reader at some point. But yeah, usually I will just use that occasionally if I'm traveling, or if like the wait for the physical book at the library is so much astronomically longer than the wait for the digital book. But I prefer mostly physical books. And, oh, tag some people is the next one. And if you do decide to make the video, please tag me in it because I need to watch more people's videos and follow new channels. That would be most enjoyable for me. So if you like what you see here and you'd like to stick around, you know where the subscribe button is. Hopefully you know what to do with it. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.